Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy time zone, wherever you are. It's a busy, crowded stream today, as you can see. I've got 3 fantastic guests, and I'm really excited about today. Hope everyone is equally excited. How is your Friday going so far? Or I hope you got good plans for Friday. How are you? Morgan, Jivan, Jimmy, one at a time.
Yeah,
It's a
good. I'm looking forward to the weekend.
it is a
So
good
far, so
Friday.
good this week.
So, yeah.
Yep, it was busy week, but yes, it is now the weekend is coming, and happy Friday to everybody.
How about you, Jimmy?
Doing good, doing good. Excited to show off some tracing stuff in the morning. And what better time, right?
Almost as exciting as identity, I think. It's a competition. Tracing, identity. We get developers excited about these things. Is anyone taking any time off next week? It's spring break, right? For us, at least here in Seattle. So I don't know if anyone is taking time off.
Yeah, I'm taking time off next to next week. Yeah, but yep, I'm looking for it. So
Jimmy's like, no, I work
yes, I
24/7.
work 24/7 without break. It's like I'm gonna do it.
No rest for the wicked. Right. So
Sure.
before we kick it off, and before we go and talk about M365 app admin experience, and we do tracing, which are very exciting subjects, I have a couple of news. So the first one is that the Node.js library for MSAL has rolled out, so it's not in public preview anymore. Whoop whoop. So if you are building Node apps, so server-side apps or Electron apps or APIs with Node, then we now have a fantastic library to take you through the identity experience and set it up for you. And the second one is that as I was playing yesterday with Node.js, I realized that we changed the experience for creating secrets inside the app registration um, portal. So every time you go and create a new secret for your apps, for the client credentials, for example, then you will be presented with new options. Now the default is 6 months. It used to be 1 year. So now we will recommend 6 months, and then you can also have more refined control of how long your secrets will rely. And then, as I talked about that on Twitter, people had some fantastic suggestions, like getting Logic App notifications for when your secrets are going to expire, which is a problem. If your secrets are going to expire and your apps are going to stop working, it's a good thing to be able to automate that. So yeah, keep the good suggestions coming. I will make sure I pass them on to the team because we are looking to improve the experience. And in case you are running anything on Ubiquiti, which is a server, no, it's like networking hardware for your home, then please be aware that they got hacked in January. And that means that you need to go and update your usernames and passwords. So if you're not aware of that, I know quite a few people on the stream that actually run stuff on Ubiquiti, so that would probably be of interest. Okay, enough about me blabbing about news. Let's go to our guests. We have Morgan and Jivan who are here to talk to us about the M365 app admin experience. What do you have
Cool.
for us, friends?
Thank you. Thanks, Justos. So we both of us, we always talk about Azure Active Directory and what's new happening, different applications and all that.
Yes.
But let's today talk about something different. So Morgan, can you tell us is like, okay, what's new is cooking in M365 for our M365 admins? It's
Yeah.
the new thing which is very much like excited for all our admins and developer community.
Yeah. No, thanks, Jivan. So obviously, we've had the ability to add applications within the Azure portal. This is something that most people should be pretty familiar with, but there's the whole enterprise app section in the Azure portal where a customer can go ahead and add one of the apps that you develop, right? It's very, very straightforward. Has all the different apps here. We support thousands of apps. And Javon's team does a great job of adding in new apps and taking in all those requests, right? But what we found is that a lot of smaller companies, sometimes they're not familiar, or they think that the Azure portal is a little bit more difficult or for more advanced users. And for small businesses or medium-sized businesses, we're finding that they're using this Microsoft M365 admin console a little bit more. So we wanted to be able to allow those customers to add apps from this console as well. Does that make sense so far, everyone?
So good.
Yep.
So far, so good. Okay, cool. So if you were to sign into a test tenant or one of your own tenants, this is just the basic home screen that you would see if you log into M365 Admin Console. And I want to show you where the experience that we built is. So this is we're calling it an apps wizard, and it's just an easy way to deploy these apps with your tenant. So is this screen big enough for you guys?
I can see clearly, so at this Zoom level, we're good.
Cool. So let's go into the experience. So you're going to see a whole bunch of different cards here, and we're going to be under this training and guide section. And if you click customize setup guidance, you're going to have access to a whole bunch of different wizards. There's going to be things for Exchange and Teams, etc. What we're going to be talking about today is right here. It's integrated third-party cloud app. So this is where admins can go ahead and add these apps. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Yep.
Cool. Cool. Now, I think I want to talk about maybe 3 key takeaways from this experience. Obviously, you've probably seen in the Azure portal, you can go ahead and add apps, and we have a similar experience here where we have very popular apps that the average customer would go ahead and add. Basic search functionality, so they can go ahead and search for an app that might not be on that list, right? But one of the key takeaways that I want everyone to think about is requesting an app. So for developers, if your customers they don't find your app here, they can actually request it in a very, very easy way. All they have to do is put in the app name, put in the URL, and that's it. It's actually a very streamlined process.
And
Any
and
questions so
that
far?
dir- and that feedback directly comes to our team so that actually we can work with you guys as application developers and make sure that your application is available into the app gallery for all our enterprise customers. And not only like small, medium, but also along with the large enterprise customers who can able to leverage the app for single sign-on and user provisioning. If you're using MS Graph, that's like a cherry on the cake, I'll say. But yeah, all of these particular apps can be easily searchable from different experience, like M365, what you're looking, and also through Azure AD.
Very good, very good. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and add an app. I'm going to go through a simple scenario where we're going to add Salesforce. We select the app and go next. And it's going to come up with a pop-up. This pop-up is basically telling me, oh, wait, hold on 1 second. You actually have Salesforce already integrated with your tenant. Are you sure you want to continue? And we have this functionality for those customers that might want to do tests beforehand. So they'll set up 2 different instances. They might have a demo and then they might have their production environment. So they can go ahead and continue and add that second app. But we just want to notify people to make sure that they understand that, right?
Hey Morgan, very
Yep.
quick question.
Yeah.
Do you have speakers somewhere over there?
I do not know.
Oh, interesting. There's echo coming from your end, but only when you speak.
Only when I speak. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I do not have speakers.
Huh.
I'm not too sure.
Jimmy? Or Jivan? Does anyone have any speakers on?
No, mine is also on headphone. So, but yeah, there is a little echo over
Okay.
there. Oh, now it is gone. So I don't know what happened in between.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. Let's continue. So number 2 takeaway is making it really, really easy for folks to understand what sign-in method is available for the app and which one that we actually recommend for the app. So in this case, we're showing that for Salesforce supports SAML, password-based, and linked. And in the standard Azure portal, we show these things, but we actually don't give a recommendation or show for these smaller customers, like, why is this important? What we saw in some user research studies is some of these smaller customers, they don't even know what the word SAML means. Like they didn't know what it was. And so they were actually picking password-based erroneously. So hopefully this will help those smaller customers choose the right method for single sign-on.
Well, that's very nice. So you can choose the right option for your team or your company.
Exactly. For your company. This is for the tenant all up. And
Yep.
it's just supposed to help folks so they don't choose a less secure method, right? Like there's going to be some circumstances that password-based and linked make sense, but we want to make sure that people know that SAML is the right method to go to.
In general, our recommendation is to use the token-based authentication, whether it's SAML, OpenID Connect, or WSFET. But yeah, use the token-based authentication is our general recommendation.
Now, so that's number 2 takeaway. Let's go through number 3. Number 3 is for smaller companies, we wanted to make the process of configuring SAML very, very easy. And we wanted to break it down into bite-sized chunks. So these maybe generalist admins could make it very, very easy to add the app, okay? So we've actually, if you move forward here, there's a bunch of fields that a customer would have to add. Think of this relationship as a handshake, right? I think most developers understand this handshake, right? You have to provide information from that third-party app, and then Azure AD has to go ahead and provide information back up to build that trust relationship, right? And this is what this is going through. So I'm not going to go through all the different fields here. I'm going to put in some bogus information, but it's basically in the normal experience for enterprises, we've actually put in, there's upwards of, I think, Javon, keep me honest here, I think there's about 5 different steps. And in this experience, we've broken this down only to 2 steps. So we have this where you put in the information from the app itself, and then if you click next, This will show you all the download information, and this is the information that you would upload into that third-party app. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
So there's just two screens, really straightforward. We give you clear guidance for those admins of where they could find the appropriate information and so on and so forth, right?
Okay.
Now, the last few sections, pretty quick. We can easily go ahead and add users and groups, so those customers can go ahead and add some folks quite easily. So let me go ahead and put in myself here. I want to add myself, and then I'm going to add myself as this particular role. So very simple ways for the end users to add users and groups. There is some basic test functionality. The test functionality right now isn't going to work because I don't have the trust relationship with Salesforce right now.
Sure.
But if the customer wanted to do some testing, they could go ahead and do that here. We have a whole bunch of resources for them to debug any issues that they come up with.
Nice.
And then last but not least, a whole configuration showing what they've configured, all the users that were assigned, etc. And if they did want to do some really advanced stuff, let's say they have some custom attributes, etc., they could just go to the Azure portal. This link is going to open up that particular app in the portal for them, so they don't have to go ahead and search around for it. We try to make it really easy for folks. And then last but not least, on this last page, we've tried to give the end or that admin all the other things that we would want them to do, and then particularly all about what this means for the end user, right? At the end of the day, we're adding apps so their end users can go ahead and access those apps, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of customers don't even know about My Apps portal. A lot of customers don't even know that they can integrate apps. They think that it's all about Azure AD is Azure AD for Microsoft apps. They don't know that it's actually Azure AD that can be used for the Salesforces of the world, the ServiceNows of the world, right? And so where would these things land for their customer or their end users? So we've given links right here for the My Apps portal.
Oh, nice.
And so this would show if we integrated the app, it would show up here, and they would have access to all their apps. They can create their own collections as well. So they can go ahead and say, let's say I want a collection just for marketing apps, and marketing has a dedicated group of apps. Or me as an end user, I can create my own group of collections now and say, these are the things that I use most, and this is what I want in my dashboard. And these same exact things will be in the Office portal as well. So if the customer feels like, I don't want to use My Apps portal, they could always just use the experience that they're used to in Office if they're using Office apps like Outlook Online, etc.,
Well,
and
that's
Teams,
nice.
etc.
Is that a new
Right?
feature that we added to Office so you can launch your apps from there, or has that been there for a while?
Yeah, I believe, Jivan, keep me honest here. I think Collections released Jade very recently, right?
Yeah, it's been there, but we just now align the experiences between the My Apps portal and the Office portal so that wherever you go, you will see the same consistent experience across. And henceforward, also, whatever the changes happening, you will see everything is streamlined with that.
Nice. So the nice thing here is that if I need to launch a Dropbox or Salesforce or whatever, I just come into whichever portal works for me best. I don't have to choose one and then just launch it, and I don't have to sign in or remember passwords or what have you. So eliminating passwords or remembering accounts, because now we're fully integrated with these apps. I love it. Okay.
Exactly. And so
Yeah, and you can onboard any third-party app or first-party app that you have, right? So companies can build their own apps and add them there, or they can bring external apps and add them to the portal. So you have the one portal to rule them all. If you have
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and I think specifically for developers that are looking for or building apps for these like SMBs or mid-sized companies, this is going to be a great experience for them because, well, once they have integrated the app with us, then the admin has this very easy experience, right? And they're familiar with the M365 admin console already. They can go ahead and add the app that you're developing. It's very straightforward, right?
Perfect.
That's all I got.
That's more than enough. Jivan has something. Hey, Jivan.
Jivan, you
Yeah,
have something?
yeah, okay. Yeah. So A couple of particular asks we have it for the audience over here. We want you to be next Salesforce, and for that we want you to develop more SaaS applications so that we can able to make it available into our app gallery and into these experiences so that you can reach out to your enterprise customers along with us, and we will help you into that journey. The last thing what I have, Morgan, can you just go back and show us the uh, entry experience for M365 from where I can actually start this particular flow? I think we didn't talk a lot about that in the
Yeah,
first.
did you want to go all the way to the
Yes,
the
setup
main
guidance. Yes, the main, yeah, the
Yep,
main home page, and from there, how do I come to the setup guidance? So that, yeah,
yep. So there's different cards here. Depending on how the admin has set this up, by default, this should come up. If it's not up by default, there's this little add cards button. And then the training and guides card will be here. They can go ahead and add that if they want. And then it's right here, this customized setup guidance. This basically will be the link that will provide all the different links for all the different wizards. But this particular one that we talked about is this integrate a third-party cloud app. I'm also going to go ahead and give the link to Christos, so he'll be able to share that with the audience.
You bet. We'll add it to the YouTube video as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it will be right below in the links. As well with any other links that we'll cover today on the stream. So we'll make sure that this information makes it to you. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Jivan, you were muted. Go on.
so if you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us. It's like I think you will have Christos and my particular Twitter handle pretty much available, GvenST, and Morgan has it too. So it's like, yeah, you can tweet us and let us know what's your feedback, and happy to help us.
Sweet. Yes. We'll make sure that any question. By the way, we have a Discord channel, so at the very top you can join our Discord. If you have any questions about what we covered today, whether it's stuff that Jimmy will talk about or whether it's the things that we heard this morning from Morgan and Jivan, then please make sure to join the community and ask the questions away. It's a very active community. We can barely keep up with all the questions, so we expect more questions. Bring it on, as I say. Right. That's good. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much, both Morgan and Jivan, for spending some time with us this morning. We'll let you go and enjoy your weekend and your time off next week if you're taking time off. And
Yeah.
we're going to transition to just me and Jimmy, who's been patiently sitting there hearing all this.
Cool. Hey, guys, take care. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thank you. Have a great weekend, guys.
Have a great weekend. Take care.
Bye.
Right. So, Jimmy, it's just the two of us.
All right.
Just the two of us.
That's not necessary.
Yeah, okay. No more singing. I get it. Right. So let me get your screen up in a second. Let me just do that. And you know what? After doing OBS for some time now, I feel that if I were to change careers, being an air traffic controller will be the perfect thing. So
Yeah, I see some of these streaming setups are just nuts to me. You
yeah,
know?
yeah, and I'm nowhere near in being a pro, but I get the chance to speak to awesome people like you, man. So first of
All
all,
right.
we've met quite a few times on quite a few conferences. So do you miss the scene? Do you miss being there?
No, I hated it. You know, who wants to travel to interesting places and meet interesting people? You know.
President people excluded. So we're talking about all the other people that are interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't been in any conferences in a year, I guess, right? Probably slightly more.
Yeah, I think my last trip was a business trip to Minneapolis where it was like minus 20 outside. So I don't miss those trips very much.
No. But I definitely miss Europe these days and hang out with the other conferences. Do you still do conferences and user groups? Do you get a chance to do them or?
Yeah, actually, I don't mind the online stuff because it's helped me connect with user groups, especially that I really couldn't do anymore because
Exactly.
it was too hard to travel.
You
I
can't
used to
fly
do
everywhere. Yeah.
I used to do like road trips and road shows, but that was just so exhausting. I stopped doing it. So it's been kind of nice to be able to connect to communities that I couldn't wasn't able to do before.
So pros and cons. You are obviously very well known in the community. You're the creator and maintainer of very many popular open source libraries like Automapper and Mediator. I've used them. I've done my own damage in the past using these libraries. So you can use them and abuse them. It's totally down to you. I know that the debate is strong with some of them, but you have helped the .NET community a lot with your work. And you work as an independent consultant, hence the reason why you don't take as much time off. I've been in the consulting world and know that every day off is not just losing money, but it's also spending money. So it's like double the whammy.
Yeah.
And you're the chief architect at Headspring.
Yep.
Are you solo there, or do you have other people working for you as well?
So I actually worked like full time at Headspring for 13 years, I guess.
Okay.
And then left to do more independent stuff, but I'm still with Headspring just now on like a 1099 or
Right.
contract basis. So I still do a lot of work with them. Yeah.
Okay. And you've been an MVP since 2009.
Oh, I know. That was before I had any gray hair, I guess.
Did you attend the MVP summit this week?
I did. I enjoyed the topics, but I missed the hallway conversations there, and the feedback. It's tough to get like feedback because I've been to a few of those MVP summits where people are yelling from the back how much they hated stuff. So I couldn't yell back. No, I wasn't there.
Use Automapper. I'm telling you.
No.
Man, yeah, it's a lot, and I know that people had quite a few interesting topics to discuss about, especially with .NET 6 and where .NET is going. But in the meantime, we're here.
Yeah, I really love saying redacted.
Redacted. I'm so excited about. I can't say that. Lots of NDA things. In fact, I had a demo from. I was like one late night, I think on Monday. Some of the MVPs pinged me. It's like, hey, do you want to jump on a Zoom call with us and have a chat about stuff? I was like, yeah, let's kick it back. And Scott Hunter jumped on the call as well. He was so excited. He's like, hey guys, have you seen this awesome feature? It's like, I think so. And then he did a demo and everyone's like, oh my God, it's amazing. So I love the fact that he was so excited about it that he jumped on a 8 p.m. call just to show us that. So that's the MVP life, right? If you're not an MVP, you should definitely try to join the communities. It's always exciting and it's growing fast, the MVP community. And today we're doing distributed tracing, my friends, with
Yes.
.NET. So that is a lot. Like I've done tracing before, and I've usually offloaded somebody else to do the hard lifting for me, like a service on Azure. But I'm really curious to see how and why. Is it different for .NET 5, for example, than it was for .NET Core 3 or full .NET?
It is. So I'm going to be showing some of those new pieces.
Nice.
And how they
Nice.
fit in. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the floor is yours, my friend.
Okay. So I did want to set up a little bit of just like why we should care or why you should care about distributed tracing. And I got to be honest, like I wish I didn't have to care. If I imagine like a simple application and like everything is in one single box that like I run the app and it doesn't talk to anything else. When something goes wrong, something blows up, we get this thing on the right, which is a stack trace.
I love it. I love the stack trace.
And then, like even stack traces, right? Those are actually hard to come up with. Like that was like a big innovation to be able to say when my application blows up, show the trace of calls in my application about how that call blew up and all the calls that led to that call blowing up. And you get this exception stack trace that tells you all the methods that go into it.
Yep.
So this is great when everything's inside one single application. Where things get tricky is when I start to look at like distributed systems and applications talking to other applications. So this picture I got an API that talks to some background worker service through something, maybe APIs or something else. But then it also talks to some other worker service in the background using a different communication. Maybe it's using messaging via Azure Service Bus or RabbitMQ or whatever. So in this picture, if I got something that blows up way down, way far away from my application, typically, if I don't have any kind of other tracing tool set up, my stack trace is limited to that one single application.
Yes.
But I don't have a way to trace it back to the originating API call.
Yep.
So that's really where distributed tracing comes into play. It says, well, we've got all these kind of localized traces, localized stack traces, if you will, between each of these different applications. But if I want to be able to kind of Humpty Dumpty this thing back together again, I need a way to connect all these different arrows to all these different boxes.
Yeah.
And that's what distributed tracing is all about.
Because
is
as every
connecting those
developer
boxes.
knows, getting getting an exception somewhere, it's the dreaded experience of trying to recreate that and try to trace the steps of how did things end up to that situation. And if you don't have any logging or tracing, then you're stuffed. Being able to recreate what happened in the live environment, it's not always as easy as most of the people that are watching this one will have experienced at some point in their life. So tracing is important, especially for distributed systems like that.
And it was like, I was working at Dell, I think about 13 or 14 years ago, forever ago now. And we had actually come up with our own distributed tracing system. We had to like discover,
Wow.
oh, we need this because I was on the cart checkout team, and there's a lot of services going behind the scenes to be able to check out your cart.
Yep.
And so when something went wrong on our services, we needed to put things together again. And so we came up with a kind of a simple system, which is this idea of using kind of like linked lists between different traces.
Linked lists.
And so it's almost like if you've dug into the details of like Git, for example, Git commits always have this parent ID associated with that commit, so you can link all the commits together.
Yep.
And so that's what we have here is a graph of traces of process traces, so that when I have any one application doing work, as part of doing the work, I have a correlation identifier that links back to some other parent process of work being done.
Right.
And we just have to make sure that in the arrows of communication between these different processes that we transmit our identifiers for those IDs, so that whenever something goes wrong in a downstream service or system, I have the context of my parents available to me as well.
Right.
This is what we had to come up with ourselves, and it took us like a year, I think, to really get it figured out. And some other folks have done this as well. So one popular one out there is Zipkin, and Zipkin came from Netflix, maybe, I don't remember. One of those internet like Web 2.0, like every distributed systems companies, microservice companies, and so they started to standardize what this data was flowing between each of these different services. And so in this case, Zipkin is a distributed tracing tool, which is not just the identifiers flowing from process to process and system to system, but also something has to like listen to this information and put all the pieces back together again to say, okay, based on this one event that happened, these are all the other linked events that we found associated with that individual trace. So this is kind of a well-established standard and works really well for the Zipkin folks. So a couple of years ago, the W3C, which is a standards organization, said, "This is great. Let's what we found is that every single tracing tool has kind of invented its own sort of tracing identifiers."
Oh, yes.
And you may have seen this if you've ever popped open the hood of HTTP traffic and you're using application insights. You may notice some like extra headers in there with some weird looking values, and those are custom tracing identifiers for application insights. I use some other tools that have their own like custom way of doing this tracing information. So the W3C said, well, let's standardize on this. And so folks from different tracing tools, including Jaeger and a few others, and from people that make these different services, so Microsoft, Google, and a few others. So let's standardize on what these tracing identifiers look like and the header that is going to be attached to each of these different calls.
Awesome.
So that's the W3C trace context standard, which was put to 1.0 mode for whatever, I forget the term it's called, but like it's officially, it's now a blessed standard as of February of last year, so February 2020, which were the before times, I think.
Oh, really? It took them
February
that long
2020.
to ratify the standard? Damn.
Yes, well, there's the whole thing on standards. If you have
Yes.
N standards, you want to standardize those. Now you have N+1 standards. So
Yeah.
they really wanted to make sure that they got this right, especially for different kinds of traffic. So not just HTTP-based traffic, but let's say you wanted to do a messaging-based traffic,
Right.
or you have the RPC one, gRPC-based traffic. Yeah, so each of those has kind of different requirements for what the headers need to be. So gRPC is like, I want things to be very compact because it's supposed to be very fast and low latency.
Right.
So that took a while for us to, for everyone to agree, but it's been ratified. And so with .NET 5, this is now the out-of-the-box standard for tracing information in all of our applications. But what about non-HTTP traffic? So if I have gRPC, or like in our case, we're using RabbitMQ and Azure Service Bus.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we just use that same kind of header information and attach it to whatever that message is going out the door. And then on the receiving side, it would just need to read that header information and then populate the rest of the distributed tracing information. Okay. So that's kind of where things are today with the tracing information flowing through our different systems. But there's another important part here. This is all well and good, but it is meaningless unless something's actually looking at this information to be able to show you what happened with some individual trace or process.
Yes.
So I've had some applications that use Zipkin, and so Zipkin is a tool to listen to this tracing information and be able to visualize and show you, let you search and do other things. And so the idea is that you have something in each of these applications that is pushing that tracing information out to something that's collecting that tracing information. In this case, it's Zipkin. Now I'm in consulting, and so I don't always get to pick and choose the tools being used. So one client maybe use Zipkin. Another client may be using Jaeger. Another client may be using Application Insights. And so the last problem is that we want to solve for here is if I have another tracing tool, I don't want to have like this matrix of communications and collecting utilities to be able to support any kind of new communication technology that comes down the line.
Right.
So my example, I use a lot of messaging, and so I don't want to have like a Jaeger messaging exporter and a Zipkin messaging exporter and an Application Insights messaging exporter. I'd like to standardize on how that information is identified, traced, collected, and exported. And the final piece of the puzzle is open telemetry. Open telemetry is a multi-platform effort to standardize the three pillars of observability. And those pillars are logging, tracing, and metrics. And so for many, many different platforms, just name the platform, maybe not COBOL, but like any sort of platform people would build with these days. There's an open telemetry extension to that project to standardize on each of those different pillars. And the idea is that open telemetry kind of standardizes how those items are identified. And then if I want to then visualize that information as something else, then I just build a single exporter or exporter for open telemetry. And now it's able to look at any kind of platform, any kind of system, any kind of service.
Right.
So I don't have to build a Jaeger ASP.NET Core thing and a Jaeger HTTP thing and a Jaeger RabbitMQ thing. Instead, those things just standardize on how they collect information, and then there's a standard way now for us to export that information out. So Microsoft is heavily involved in this as well.
Nice.
So in the .NET 5 timeframe, they've adapted their APIs to be able to support the open telemetry standards. And so those are some of the things I'll be demoing today, is not just the new .NET 5 diagnostic things, but also how easy it is to now then look at that stuff inside of .NET. As of today, the logging and tracing standards are in 1.0. The next one is going to be metrics, and we can kind of expect that metrics API to be finalized later this year.
More ratification. I love it.
Yes. So for logging, we actually already have that with the Microsoft Extensions logger. That's kind of the de facto logger these days, or at least the standardized interface that other loggers can also plug into as well. So that logger is like the open telemetry logger. It conforms to the all the kind of APIs there. And then for tracing, that's going to be the system diagnostics. I forget the name of the package. I'll show it here in a second. And then metrics will be some new APIs coming with in the .NET 6 timeframe.
Sweet.
All right, that's enough talk
Enough talking.
with boxes and errors. Let's talk. Let's look at code.
Enough slides.
All right, so I got 3 demos for us today. One, I'll just be showing some basics around activities, which is the API for tracing in .NET since like .NET 3
Okay.
or 4. It's been around for a while,
So
but they've
.NET
adapted that
4
API.
or .NET 3, just to clarify.
No, like .NET, like classic .NET. It's
Full
been around for
frame
a
or
while.
.NET. Man, it's
Yeah.
hard to explain these things now, right?
I know.
Yeah.
But that API has been around for a while. It's just been continuously adapted to support like later and later standards. So the diagnostics APIs have now been adapted to the open telemetry standards.
I
So I'll be
see.
showing some basics around that. Then I'll be showing some extensions for open telemetry to make it very easy for us to listen to these events and be able to visualize them in something.
Right.
And then finally, I'll be showing some of the exporters for open telemetry to show you how easy it is to hook up visualizations for this stuff.
Nice,
All right.
nice. Let's do this.
So let's go to first to some activity basics. I'm going to switch over to ye old Visual Studio. And I put it up to 150%. Is this big enough? Do I need to go bigger?
I think 175 would probably work better, if you don't mind.
Okay, that means I have to type it in because it's not a standard one. 175. There we go. Okay. All right, so this is a really dumb application, right? This is like I got a console write line something, I'm doing something, and then this method does something else.
Okay.
So if I have an exception that happens here, I'll get a set trace from this one to this one. Now, right now I've got these like console write lines littered throughout my application, or maybe log statements, something like that. So if I'm adapting someone else's library, then it would be nice if that other library was able to emit some diagnostic events that I could then subscribe to
Yes.
be able to like see interesting stuff.
Yep.
So we can actually do that. So I'll say var activity. Oh gosh, activity. There he goes. New activity. And I give it a name of the activity, demo. And then you can start the activity, and then you can stop the activity. Now the activity it represents some kind of interesting operation that you want to care about, basically. And so when we start the activity and when we stop it, it will also include some information about what happened in that activity. So at the end of the activity, we actually have we have things like the duration of that activity. So it has some like timing information. So between start and stop, it tells you how long it went.
So
And we can also
the activity is part of the diagnostics API.
yes. So as part of my references, I've got the system diagnostic source package. So this
Right.
package, you see it's version 5.0, but actually that package ships out of band of .NET 5 or .NET Core or whatever. So you can actually represent package with anything that supports. So it doesn't just support .NET 5, it actually supports .NET 4.6 or 4.5 and .NET Standard. So you can use it in existing applications
Right.
as well. All right, so let's do the same thing down in our other method down here. And then we'll call this activity something else. We'll call it the do something activity. What I'm going to do is put a breakpoint right here, and we'll step through to look at this activity and see how it changes over time.
Yeah, let's do this.
All right, so when I run this application, it's going to create a new activity, and we'll look at the activity, see what's going on inside of it. and see how it changes after I actually start the activity. So if I look at this activity now, of course it's null, so let's go past it 1. Now if I look at this activity, we'll see that it has an ID, but the ID is null. It's kind of hard to, I don't think I can zoom that part, unfortunately, but
No,
the
it's
ID
fine.
is null.
Yeah.
All right. Now if I go past it, if I start the activity, now the activity has an ID. There it is. Ooh, gosh, it's ugly, but it has an ID. It's got 00-gobbledygook-gobbledygook-00.
It's more than a GUID.
That
It's like 2 GUIDs
It
put
is.
together.
Yeah, exactly. You notice the
Nice.
ID format says W3C. So that is the new thing in .NET 5. In .NET 5, it opts in automatically to the W3C standard. There are other ID formats out there, like Zipkin has its own ID format, but previous to this, .NET had its own ID format. So .NET 5, it says let's just use the standard version that we helped create here, and the W3C standard describes what all these different pieces are. Okay, so now let's go inside of our do something method, and this has its own activity. Now, at this point, I'll pause for a second, and one of the things we want to be able to do is to link these two activities together. But I don't want to have to change my code to pass in like the parent activity everywhere I go all out on the chain.
Yeah, because that will be a lot of code to pass around in the whole lab, right?
Exactly. So activity actually has, let me just go past 1. Activity, there's a static property in here. I'll call it activity.current, static members, current. And so this current activity is a async local, so it flows across async context, static property that is the current activity for any kind of execution that you have here. So my current activity is actually the activity that I created in the previous method. So it's, instead of me having to like pass activities around, there's a standard place I go to be able to see what the current activity is. Mm-hmm. Now this activity, I haven't started it yet, so we notice that the ID is null, and the parent is null as well. But as soon as I start the activity,
It will get populated.
not only does the ID get populated, but also the parents and the parent ID gets populated.
Right.
Now, one other thing you'll see here, if I look at the ID and the parent ID, you'll notice that some of these characters are the same and some of them are different. So 00 dash, that first set of characters, those are the same between those two different activities. And that's because that is the trace ID. So all activities, they get kind of started within the same context, get the same trace ID. And then the last ones are different. That's known as the span ID. And that span ID should be different for each individual activity. So it's a way of just kind of identifying, like linking these different things together inside one single value. So this is like
almost like
the
correlation ID, right? Like you can
Exactly.
correlate this. So does this propagate to other services outside this context?
So that'll be my next demo, is to,
All right,
is
okay.
to show you.
I'm jumping the gun here. I'm so excited that I'm like racing ahead. See?
Yeah, so-
I still like it here. Go.
The diagnostics API is a way for us to define these interesting activities inside of our system.
Right.
And there's some other parts to this. So whenever we start activities, it actually raises an event through a standard API as well. Mm-hmm. So we can subscribe to those activity events and say, let's go ahead and export those activity events to some other trace listener, some other external system. But this activity stuff right now is all in process. So my parent got populated from like this current activity. But for incoming web requests or incoming messages, what needs to happen is the host application needs to look at the incoming information, grab this information off of the incoming header, and populate the parent ID of my current activity. So the parent property will be null, but the parent ID will have the value of whatever the parent thing was. So let's actually switch over now to my next demo.
Which I almost stole the thunder from.
Exactly. It was very disappointing. And bump this up to...
Promise it won't happen again. I promise.
Okay. So those activities raise diagnostic events. And actually, maybe I'll just show you real quick what it looks like to subscribe to those events.
Yep.
So I've got an after version of this. So let me go comment this all out and then uncomment this one. And the other piece of the diagnostic API is the ability to listen to activity events. And so what I've defined here is an activity source. And this is a source of activity events.
Okay.
And this is something that I can subscribe to events to be able to do whatever I want, really.
Yeah.
So what I've got here is I've defined an activity listener and has a few properties. First, it says, should I listen to this thing? And so this thing being passed in is actually this activity source object. So I can say, I'm only interested in ones with this name or that name. So it may be like HTTP stuff or SQL stuff. You can say I only care about these specific kinds of events. This sample property says, should I actually sample this this specific event? So if I have like a high traffic site, maybe I want to have throttling to say only sample every 10th or every 100th event, because if I sample everything, like my application would slow down. And then I got these callbacks for events for whenever the activity starts and when the activity stops. And so once I create this listener, I add it. I use this method to add the activity listener. And now when I run this application, we'll get this stuff popped out. Let me just put a breakpoint in here, a breakpoint in here. And when I start the activity, instead of me using just like newing up an activity, I'll actually start an activity from this activity source. And so that way it'll create the activity, start it, and raise the activity event all inside that one line of code. So this line of code is actually new in .NET, or new with the 5.0 release of diagnostic source.
Oh, that's
it's
the
kind of
difference
easy
here.
API.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, just a nicer API. So let's go ahead and run this. All right, so I am showing hello world. So right now my stat trace is right here. It's starting the activity. And then I had this callback to say the activity is now started. And so I can write out now. Yep, got a hello world. And then if I go past that, I've started the activity. And now back on my screen, I say, here's the parent ID and there's the start. Or that's the ID and then I start. I do something and I'm starting the activity again, child activity. And so now I have a parent ID and an activity ID. So you can imagine that instead of me like just writing stuff out to the console, if I push this out to a tracing utility or tracing server, then I'd be able to have some kind of storage that can then Humpty Dumpty all this stuff back together again. So this stuff, like activity listeners and stuff like that, whenever you are using something like Application Insights, what you're doing is adding these listeners in to be able to listen to these diagnostic events and push that data out to Application Insights. So you just do like services.add application insights, and then it's already defined all these listeners for you to be able to do all this junk. But I wanted to show open telemetry because I've got a case where there's not an application insights extension for what I'm using. And so in my case, I'm using messaging with RabbitMQ.
Oh.
RabbitMQ doesn't have out-of-the-box support for application insights. If you go Google App Insights, RabbitMQ, there's like someone's created some NuGet package somewhere that hasn't been updated in 3 years or something. So you're like, well, that stinks. And my next client uses RabbitMQ but Jaeger, and I have to go find someone that has a Jaeger extension to that. So OpenTelemetry is about bridging those gaps. So I don't have to have RabbitMQ Jaeger, RabbitMQ Zipkin, RabbitMQ App Insights,
Right.
Azure Service Bus App Insights, Azure, it's trying to get rid of that crazy matrix.
So does it act like a proxy to everything that you need to communicate with, in effect?
So what OpenTelemetry will do is standardize on us listening to all these activities,
Okay.
and then have extensions to this that then push out to then all the different exporters. So let's go swap over now to.
So is it an intermediate step? So rather than going directly to App Insights, I can use OpenTelemetry to feed into App Insights or RabbitMQ or Service Bus or Event Hubs or whatever. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. So this is an application, a web application, and I've added a few NuGet packages here. I've got OpenTelemetry extensions for hosting. So this is the services.add OpenTelemetry. And what that is doing behind the scenes, oh, I should have updated out of RC2, whatever.
It's fine, it's fine. We like to live dangerously. There you go. We're playing with RC packages. Why not?
I think this is actually 1.0 now, but anyway, whatever. That what it's doing for us is putting a background service in our application to be able to listen to these diagnostic events and push them out to something.
Nice.
These other two packages are instrumentation. So these are things that are listening to the activity-based events.
Okay.
So as long as my library supports these standard activities, then I just need to have something that's listening to those events, and that's the OpenTelemetry instrumentation. And then finally, I need something to export them out. So I've got some exporters here. I've got exporter for just console, so you can see these events in your console application.
Yes.
And I've also got exporters for Zipkin and Jaeger.
Oh,
So-
I see. So let me see. I understand this. So you have the OpenTelemetry library. So you need the extensions. So you have the instrumentation for ASP.NET Core, which will capture events from the ASP.NET pipeline, I guess, and events. And then you have the instrumentation for SQL client. Does that mean that if I'm using EF Core, then it will capture everything that goes to SQL Server and back? Or do I need to
Exactly.
have an EF? Oh, okay. So it doesn't care. As long as using SQL Server somewhere, it will
Exactly.
capture. Perfect. And then in order for me to push that telemetry somewhere, we have exporters. So we use the OpenTelemetry exporters to push to multiple environments at the same time, or multiple targets at the same time.
Exactly.
Nice.
And what I'm trying to avoid is like coming into a project and have to write App Insights specific code.
Yes.
I don't want to do that anymore
Yep.
because that doesn't translate. It's not able to use it anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So if I state it on these APIs, then I'm just adding exporters and instrumentation, and then that takes care of it all. And me as someone, like if I'm Microsoft
Yep.
and I want to enable telemetry, I don't want to have to support all these different libraries of different exporters.
Yep.
Instead, I just standardize on using activities,
Mm-hmm.
and then these listeners will then pick up those activities and push them out the door to these exporters.
Now, I have an important question, and I'm hoping I'm not stealing from your thunder. So let's say you're coming into a project, you've been hired to work with our company, and we have a 3-year-old ASP.NET application running somewhere, and we have no logging. We're awful at that. We're appalling. We can't find any traces. We're logging everything to a text file or whatever. And you come in and say, hey, let me fix this for you, right? Let me make it better for you. Now I know with App Insights, when you add the App Insights library, you don't have to add a lot of code. In fact, you don't have to write any code other than instantiating maybe your App Insights client. What happens when you come and say, hey, let's use OpenTelemetry? Do I need to go and write code to grab the diagnostics and push them out? Or will these listeners do the work for me?
Yes, that is a fantastic question. Now, one of the things that's kind of great about Microsoft standardizing around the activity API is they already have activities all throughout their current server, any kind of thing that's listening to traffic.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So even all the way back to like ASP.NET 4.5, they've got activities in there.
Right.
So what they didn't want to do with OpenTelemetry, and this is different than like all the other OpenTelemetry APIs.
Okay.
All the other OpenTelemetry APIs made up like basically a new API for traces, spans, metrics, logging.
Yes, got
What
it.
Microsoft said is like, we don't want to have to go back to all of our current frameworks and go mess with them and swap out the API. Like, well, now you have to upgrade to .NET 4.8.3
Yes.
to get OpenTelemetry. They said,
Yep.
no, we've got this diagnostics already out there that's using these activities things. Even though the name is not exactly the same, OpenTelemetry calls them spans and traces, and they're just activity. And so it's a little bit of translation, but what enabled them to do is say like, well, now for this new 5.0 package, as long as you reference that new 5.0 package, you can get all this like latest and greatest stuff. But you don't have to upgrade your .NET framework because it's already exporting out the activities via events. And so these
Right.
instrumentation libraries are listening to those existing activity events to be able to do stuff. So that's how actually the existing the existing App Insights code works today. It listens for these activity events and pushes them out the door through a custom App Insights API.
Nice.
This is just a bridge
Yep.
from those activities that already exist into the exporters for OpenTelemetry. So you don't have to change your existing applications. You'll just have some registration code that I'll show you in a second.
I love it. That's a win. So you don't have to change code, which is very important. So if you want to fix your lack of telemetry, which is very common, or bad telemetry, or anything too much, too little, then this is the way to do it. And there will be a follow-up question, by the way. So show us, and then
Sure.
I will have another question.
My application, let's see, this has got 3 applications. So I showed earlier there's like a box where there's an API, a worker service, and some other background service.
Okay.
So these are all hooked up via HTTP and RabbitMQ. So let me go ahead and run this. And I'll just go through the swashbuckle UI, and we'll show kind of connecting these dots of these 3 different applications.
Yes. Swashbuckle, Open API. Do people still call
Yes.
it Swagger, or I didn't pay attention to what you said. Did you say Open API or did you say Swagger?
I didn't say either, actually. I just said
Just
swashbuckle, but yeah.
Okay. So the audience can make whatever they want out of it, right?
Yeah, that one is fine. All right. So, but yes, this is Swagger 3.0, which is Open API. Okay. So this is a really dumb application, and I've got this web application here. So I'm going to go execute one of these API endpoints. We'll just say, try it out. Hello, 425 show.
Oh,
Yeah. All right. So now behind the scenes, this is doing a lot. So the response body is just nothing. It's just a GUID, whatever. But behind the scenes, it's doing a lot. It's sending a message via RabbitMQ. That RabbitMQ thing is calling 2 other things. One of them is using MongoDB, and one of them is using SQL. And then finally, it replies back via RabbitMQ to the host web application process. And it's actually got a background service in that thing that is like gathered it all together. So here is the handler for that response, and it said received. Back at you, hello 425 show. It's got weather information and is hitting a database to get it like your favorite Simpsons character. So it's just a bunch of junk that
how
it's
do
trying
you
to do
know?
behind the
Are
scenes.
you running ML? Are you running ML behind the scenes?
Yeah, ml.random, just random. That's it. All right. So that code is split across 3 different projects. It's got different APIs. It's just got a bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes. So I wanted to show what that looked like in Zipkin.
Yeah.
So let's pull up Zipkin. I'll hit search. And at the top, I see this trace that shows a bunch of different services that were talked to. And if I click into that trace, you can see this kind of complex graph of different calls that are being made.
Oh.
So as part of this, I have the initial API call. That was the first I say some point. That just executed and finished right there. But as part of that, it sent a message via RabbitMQ. Now I'm using a library on top of RabbitMQ because I'm lazy, called InServiceBus. And that's just like a syntactic sugar on top of using messaging transport. So it's just to make my life a little bit easier there. So it sent a message via RabbitMQ. I've got something that received that message via RabbitMQ. That did, let's see what that did something else. It sent another message to do something else. That called an API that called into SQL. So I can see the SQL over here on the right. Called some other SQL as well. This sent 2 messages actually. So I got one message here and another message there.
So I have a question here because I might forget later on. If I am logging sensitive information, let's say credit cards, can we filter them out? Can we filter PII information before they get logged? Do you have to write custom logic for that?
Yes, so you can. So these collectors by default don't collect that kind of information. So you have to kind of opt in to be able to collect it.
Right.
So typically we don't.
Okay.
Like as part of the tracing tool, we don't collect like the details of the request.
Yeah.
The idea here is that you still have logs.
Yes.
And so what we would do here is we get to the trace we want. We take the the trace ID or the span ID,
Yep.
and we would put that in our logging tool, search for that, and now I get the full logs of that individual step.
Right.
So if you ever use like Splunk, one of the things I hate in Splunk is just the needle in the haystack, trying to find the right thing inside of there. And so you do log enrichment, right? Let's like put the, I don't know, put some identifiers in our log statements so that I can kind of whittle down what I'm looking for. But I can still have like thousands of log statements for just one single set of distributed processes. So the idea behind the tracing here is that I've got this connected graph that represents like a single flow of connected processes. And once I nail I whittle down the one I'm interested in, then I can take that span ID, and that is unique for this individual trace.
Yep.
I drop that span ID in my log tool, and now I can find just that set of logs for that thing for the overall graph. So it's a way for us to like really whittle down what we're looking for by increasing the cardinality of our data in this trace.
Nice. Very quickly getting to the problematic call or the problematic trace. I like it.
So you can see way at the bottom here is that final message we had, which is back at you, hello, whatever. And here's the final set of payloads. Now that's there because I've configured it to. So let's pop open my application code and show you kind of how I set all this
stuff. That's the behind the
up.
scenes how we pass messages back and forth, right? Nice.
Yes. So, so on the OpenTelemetry side, we needed to configure a couple things. First is just adding OpenTelemetry tracing so that there's something in the background of our application listening for these application events, these activity events, to do something with. These set of instrumentation, these are the activity listeners. So by default, if nothing is listening to activity, it does nothing. So we're not adding a lot of overhead if we don't have this stuff opted in.
Right.
So for me, if I'm building its infrastructure, I want to put a lot of instrumentation in there, but I don't want to slow things down. So this set of instrumentation, once it's being listened to, it's like a Heisenberg sort of thing that if no one's listening to it, it does nothing. But as soon as I listen to it, then those activity events start lighting up.
So I have a question here. You mentioned about performance. Would you say that adding all this code and adding all this functionality adds anything to the performance of the app? Because one of the basic questions that we hear from customers is like, I want to do tracing, but it's too slow, or if I have to add any tools that might slow down my requests and what have you, since I have to listen to events. Is there any overhead to this approach?
So this right here, whenever I'm listening to activities, it will actually create those activities for us. Right. And now Microsoft has done a lot of work because that's kind of like hot path code to make sure that has as little overhead as possible. Okay. And when we raise these events, we're not listening to those events and the main request thread or thread of execution. The exporters. These things are background services in my application, pushing those traces out. And if that gets to be too much as well, then typically what folks do is do a level of sampling. So instead of me pushing every single trace out to my trace server, I could say, let's only do X many. And the idea behind there is that in production, it may be difficult to debug an individual request. Yes. But if I sample that to say we'll sample every exception that happens and we'll sample every 10th or 100th call, then I should be able to get some overall metrics for my system versus doing every single call every single time. Right. Now for my applications, like if I'm doing like back office sort of things, I can just leave it at sample everything because if I've got even 100 users or 1,000 users, that's still not very much traffic. Versus if you're Stack Overflow, you're not instrumenting every single call. I should be so lucky to build a system that is the size of Stack Overflow. So it is one of those things that you'll have to do some performance testing yourself if you feel yourself you're going to be like in that scenario of lots of traffic. Nice. Okay. Well, thank you for answering that because it's one of these questions. I want to do tracing, but I don't want to impact my performance, my app performance. The fact that it's running off the main thread is perfect. So we've got the instrumentation. We see here, here, and here. So in this case, this application is using in service bus, so it's using messaging. It's making API calls, and it's also an ASP.NET Core application. So it's got incoming HTTP traffic, and it's got outgoing HTTP traffic.
Right.
So we're going to instrument both of those things. If I go look at my other program CS, they'll have kind of similar kinds of junk in there. In the let's see, this one's Mongo. Yes, Mongo. So I've got ASP.NET Core for incoming HTTP traffic.
Right.
I'm adding MongoDB instrumentation because I want to instrument MongoDB.
Yep.
So I've added a package to instrument that. And it does messaging, so it has that as well. And my final application, let's see, does messaging, it does outgoing HTTP and incoming HTTP. So basically we have to add the instrumentation for whatever kind of network traffic our application is doing. It won't just do this for us automatically. And we don't want it to, right? We want it to only instrument the things we care about and not always have these things running, creating these activities if nobody's listening. We don't want things to be happening. So once I'm collecting those, then I need to export that information out to somewhere. So for this one, I've got Zipkin and Jaeger. There's like, I don't know, half a dozen other ones out there. So pick the name of the distributed tracing tool that you have in mind. There's going to be an exporter for that. So App Insights is one. There's a few others as well. Now, each of these does have its own like custom API to be able to record tracing information to.
Right.
So one of the things that OpenTelemetry is also doing is providing standards for those APIs, for those web APIs, to be able to report span information.
Right.
So it's sometime in the future we would just be able to say add OpenTelemetry exporter, and as long as the tracing server we're listening to supports that standard, then we won't have to reference that other thing at all in our application, the Zipkin or Jaeger App Insights.
Right.
It's kind of up to those exporters to decide to support that API, but a lot of them are just to make it easier because they want to lower the bar. Like everyone should have distributed tracing, so let's lower the bar and not have to require a bunch of changes to our applications to be able to support this.
Very nice.
So we saw the message information, and that is some configuration I did. None of this is important other than like I'm using RabbitMQ. This is in Service Bus configuration for making messaging easier. But one of the things I'm doing is configuring that thing to capture the message body. So I can turn that off in production, but maybe for debugging in lower environments, then I could say, go ahead and capture the message body so that it makes it super easy for us to debug stuff in our test environment, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Similarly, ASP.NET, there are some options you can pass in to be able to capture the traffic information for that as well. So you may have seen, let's go back to my SQL one. Is that here?
So while you're configuring these ones, if I screw up my configuration, is there a way to work out that my tracing is bad? Like, is there a way to debug my configuration here as I'm registering these services?
The big things that I run into are if I have some communication path that has not correctly propagated the trace information.
Okay.
So actually, let me show you what that looks like real quick.
Sure.
So I'm going to just run the web application by itself.
Okay.
So let's just debug.
Okay, so nothing else is listening, so let's see what happens.
Nothing else is listening, so let's see what happens. All right, so we're gonna have our swashbuckle Swagger UI thing pop up, and I'm going to execute the API endpoint, and I'll show, while that's getting loaded up, I'll show the code behind that as well.
Sure.
So this is my controller action. Hey. And then down here, I'm sending a message via RabbitMQ, and then I say return accepted with the ID of the thing.
Yeah.
So I've got logging here, I'm sending a message, and I say accepted. So here is where I'm dropping that message into RabbitMQ. So what I'll do is load up my old swashbuckle, try it out, I'll put some junk in there, execute. All right, so this returns back the GUID and the response body. Let me bump that up a little bit. There we go. That's my GUID of the response body. Now if I pop open RabbitMQ, Aha! So now we have a message there sitting in the queue. Now if I pop that open, queued messages, ooh, haha, one message sitting in the queue. I'll scroll down and I can peek.
Nice.
I'll peek the message and I want to highlight something here. So here we can see that it has tacked on the header for the trace parent.
Right.
So that's typically the thing that gets screwed up in a distributed trace, is not appropriately
Propagating the parent.
flowing the trace, propagating the correlation context throughout all the different calls. So ASP.NET Core, HTTP client, those do it for you automatically. Depending on the thing you're using, it may not have that out of the box. So in this case, there was no support for this propagation out of the box. So what I've done is added a package.
Almost feels like if you can't find it, there's an app for that. There's a package for it, right?
Exactly. So there's an extensions package to be able to surface activity events from inside of messaging.
Right.
So instead of me going to like RabbitMQ and trying to open a pull request for them, I use this helper library or this in Service Bus. So it just made it easier to say, no matter what transport that in Service Bus supports, then this will wrap the work in an activity and correctly parse the incoming and outgoing headers. Now, Azure Service Bus SDK client does support this. So if you're using Azure Service Bus, like in full Azure, you will have these tracing identifiers flowing throughout your application. But that is the big thing that gets screwed up, is you're using something that doesn't propagate the stuff. So you just have to go search out to see if it, someone probably has that extension for you already. But you can see here in this message, yes, indeed, I have this trace parent here. Now let's actually go back to Zipkin.
Yes.
See what this looks like. Let's search, and I'll look at a recent one. Ooh, that's janky. Okay, so this is the trace for that one click of the button I just did. So there's the API endpoint. So it said, it's got all the information, and here's the method, here's the path, whatever, and then it sent a message. And I've actually just dumped out all the headers for that message. You can see all that, and there's the payload. That payload for that message is just sitting in that queue. So if I go back here, and let's just rerun the whole thing. Because I'm using queuing, that means I have a durable message sitting somewhere for something else to pick up. So when I rerun this, the child processes are going to pick up that message from the queue, process it, and then propagate all that junk all over the place.
Is there
in a web application,
is there a lifespan or retry for these things?
There is actually. Right now the message is sitting there doing nothing.
Okay.
It's just sitting in the queue, whatever.
Silence. The anticipation is killing everyone. Let's see what happens.
All right. So let me go through this again.
Yep.
I'll say I'll get something, and I'm going to actually.
I'm telling you, it's going to come back with Marge Simpson again.
Exactly. All right. So this one now has a message of. Oh, look! The first one came back. The one I had before,
Yes.
it actually came back later. So this first one received back at you, and it's 37 in the film. Homer Simpson. So sorry, you got Homer Simpson this time. Now if I just go back to my trace in Zipkin, I'm just going to refresh this page, and we should see a whole bunch of new tracing information show up here. Hey! So let's see, we waited, gosh. So this is the first API endpoint, and then we killed it, okay?
Yes.
We killed all of our processes, and then we restarted them. And because that tracing header was on that message, then it was able to connect the dots in our exporter.
Oh, that's
because
fantastic.
it was able to successfully push everything out.
Yes.
Now you notice down here, I actually got an exception. That's why I was stalling for time. So you see this one's red. It actually errored out, and what it did was behind the scenes it retried that message again.
Okay.
To be able to continue with the rest of the process. So
And that's
it
the
waited.
second line. Yeah. right after that,
Yeah.
2 lines below that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is because I'm using messaging. Messaging is durable. The message is written down. So my application was able to just like wait a little bit, retry the message, and now it was able to be successful into the final one, which was then, back at you, whatever. So
Very nice.
I was able to kind of Humpty Dumpty all of this stuff all together again.
So I have a question now. I've been in companies that did very little tracing or very little logging, and then there were other companies that were flooding text files, databases, or and systems with a lot of tracing. Is there such a thing as not enough or too much tracing? And is this configurable through here to say I don't want to capture everything? I'm just interested in a subset of activities.
Yeah, there's kind of two places you can figure that. One would be in the exporting.
Okay.
So in my applications themselves, I could say I'm only interested in sampling whatever. So it could be sampling based on a time frame, like only sample exceptions. People do that a lot, is saying, just only when something goes wrong do we actually want to then sample it and then gather all that information and pushed out. And you can also do that from the application, from the tracing tool itself. So this would gather all the traces, and then when the overall trace completes, it would say, I only want to keep it if I see that there is an exception. So this one had an exception way over here. So let's actually keep everything as part of it because it's important to us. So it's kind of two places you can do that level of gathering for.
So is it an exercise of finding what really works well for your application? Because different apps will have different kind of engagement and complexities. So do you need to tweak it based on the current experience, more or less?
Yeah, exactly. It's really, really dependent on what your systems and applications are doing, and it's almost like even in the organizations I work with, it really depends on if it's kind of a front end sort of system or it's more of a back end sort of thing. Kind of what level of sampling we're going to do for the systems and how we approach it.
Cool.
For now, I just sample everything because who cares?
Yeah. we have a question from Simon Engineering on the subject of what gets logged. Is there an easy way to stop sensitive data ending up in the trace, like JWT tokens or API keys, for example, that you need to send as part of the request?
Yeah, so if I go look at, let's see, that one's the error one. Let's go look at this other more full, interesting one. So if I start looking at some of the things we see in here, it's not logging any kind of sensitive information by default. So by default, it's really just kind of like information about the request, but you notice it doesn't actually have the body of the request. It just has the URL. See, somewhere here, I think I had a post. Somewhere, is this a post? No. Web application, get. So in terms of the actual HTTP post, it does not expose out like the posted data as part of it. It's only the kind of request data.
Right.
So if you're looking at sensitive information, that would really be in your logs, not in your traces. Your logs is where you have to worry the most about. This is kind of basic request level information. Okay. If you want to see the details of any one of these kind of steps in the process, that's where we'd go over to your logs, and then in there you don't log sensitive information in your logs then.
Right. Okay. I see.
So here you can see I do log the message payload. So here, that's something I just opted in. In a production scenario, though, I would not log message payloads. This is just for like local debugging purposes.
Nice. Okay. I mean, it looks great. And I know that you're probably using quite a few tools there for demo purposes. Like I suspect that if you were, like if this was a real application, would you be engaging with all these different tools, or would you feel that it would be a subset of these loggers and these exporters, for example? Like what would be what is the choice, the tools of choice for you? Like if you say, I'm coming to this project brand new, this is what we should be using, like the company doesn't have anything or the current solution doesn't have anything, what is your suggested path?
Sure. So a decision I would not make by myself is what I would export to. So the thing that's going to be collecting the traces and visualizing it, this tool that we're showing here, Zipkin, that's more of an enterprise level decision about what we should use for tracing. So most of the time, I look to see if the organization has something already in this space that maybe they're not using yet, or not using effectively. So in this case, this demo I'm showing is actually from my client.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, not this
No,
code,
yeah.
because this is like not this
The
big,
setup.
but they use it. Yep, they use Zipkin, they use SQL, they use MongoDB, they use RabbitMQ. They're using all of these tools, so it does very much match. This is actually a very simple one. So in this case, I've got, I don't know, it was like 2 dozen in one. And for theirs, I would say it's easily would be 100 or 200 individual activities or spans in a single request. Because it's one initial request that kicks off a lot of background processing. And so all those different background processes doing their own individual stuff. So it's brings it all together into one single view.
Cool.
So if I'm saying completely from scratch, what exporter would I use? That's a complete, it depends. Because something has to gather and store this information somewhere, right? And so I look to the client or look to the organization to see if they've already got something that they're using. So if they're already in Azure, they're probably already using App Insights, or maybe they're not. I don't know. So I'd say, well, that's an easy one, right? You've already got a subscription, you've already got resources out there. So let's just turn that on, and then we can use that. If they are more on-prem, then Zipkin or Jaeger are a good choice because they're easily runnable in a container or just from an executable. Zipkin is also really nice in that it supports an in-memory option as well. So when I ran Zipkin, I really just ran like a single executable or container image, and
nice.
It's just in memory. It stores like 1 million or so events, and then once it hits that number, then it starts deleting old ones. So you don't have to worry about like disk space growing out of control or whatever.
I have another question. Can we use Jaeger to visualize App Insights traces?
So no. So the traces that we're seeing here are activity-based traces. And although App Insights has like its own version of a trace, the idea is that we wouldn't use like someone else's made-up version or someone's proprietary version of a trace and process activity. We would use the standard system diagnostics activity traces. And at that point, if I use activities, then it's super simple to be able to export those activities to anything, Jaeger, App Insights, whatever. But if my code is using custom like App Insights code, and I want to export that out to Jaeger, then really what I'm looking at is converting that code to use activities, and then it's super simple to export that out to anything at that point.
Sweet. Nice. Okay.
Now, I do have one final demo for you folks.
Love me some demos.
And this is to try to attack the needle in the haystack problem. So I'm going to, let's go ahead and just like boom, 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 boom. Let's just do a bunch of these. All right. Execute, 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 execute. So many executions. Okay. So one of the challenges with any kind of like observability tools is the ability to quickly hone in on like the one request that was your problem request.
Yeah.
And so in logs, you typically take the tack of enriching that log with context information. Serial log is great about this. You can enrich your logs with context so that every single log statement has like some context information as part of that. And we could do the same kind of thing with our traces. So if I go back to Zipkin and go back to search, I remember I hit the button a bunch of times.
Yep.
And when I hit search, we're going to see a bunch of traces here. Yikes, that's janky. I'll go back to 100% because it's all janky.
That's fine.
All right. So how do I know which one is the problem that I have here? Or really the one I'm trying to hone in on?
Yes.
Like this last execution, I want to see the trace for this specific one. So one thing we have here is, hey, there was something specific in that request. There was in this case, it was like my card ID or whatever, something that's specific to that one individual trace that is more business focused as opposed to like back end trace ID. So if I click on this one, you see it has a trace ID. So if I knew the trace ID, yes, I could say that's the one I'm interested in. But if I don't know that trace ID, I need some way to be able to find that specific trace out of the field of all the other ones. So that piece requires some extra information as part of the logging of this trace that flows down through all the different spans. And so that piece is actually known as baggage. So right here, there's actually this name of the standard is also is baggage. So if I go back, remember the original activity, I was just doing activity starts, and then the child activity was automatically linked to the parent.
Yes.
As part of my activity as well, I can actually add information to that one activity that makes it out to the trace. So if I click on this thing, down here, just click on any one of these random things. All this information are known as tags of that one specific activity or span. Now the next thing I've done is I've added baggage to my current activity. So in this case I say activity at current add baggage cart operation ID, just made up the name of the tag, and then the data as part of that is actually, this is kind of business specific data. So this is the ID of, in this case, the command I'm sitting through on RabbitMQ, but it's also the ID that I show on the screen. So it's something that's maybe the user can see or specific to the user operation that maybe is in a database as well. So you can think of things like user ID, customer ID, operation ID, card ID. Like these are all things you can go search in the database. And if I want to go find all the things associated with that overall business identifier, even across multiple requests or multiple spans or multiple traces, then what I want to do is tack that additional information on my activity so that it gets exported out to my trace. So you can see here, I've got an additional tag that is the cart operation ID, and that cart operation ID is actually flowed. So you just kind of see the top here of the tags. The cart operation ID actually flowed also through all my different spans.
Oh, I love it.
So back in RabbitMQ, I showed trace parents, but you may have seen this one right above it, which is the baggage header of cart operation ID. So this baggage is also another W3C standard called W3C baggage, and it allows me to attach additional business-specific context information that will also flow through all the different requests in my system. So if I make an HTTP request, it will also include the baggage header in that request to ensure that the other side properly receives it, and then it will shove it in the activity's baggage as well.
I love the metaphors there. Shove it in the baggage.
So we do want to be careful about that. Like it is add baggage to our request. So we only want to do this to like very kind of specific information that we want to use to kind of reduce the scope of searching for information. But what I can do, typically I would also include that in my log statements to be able to increase the cardinal logs. But if I go back to Zipkin, I can actually search. You can do this in App Insights, Jaeger as well. I'll paste in that tag. The name of the tag equals this, and I search. Oh, it's been too long.
Oh, we missed the window.
I think we did. I was talking way too long. So let me go run this again. I'll just do.
And while you do that, there is another question. Neo Asi is asking, can we pass the request ID from the client to API, to async command handler, to event handlers, and to the response?
Yes, you probably wouldn't use the request ID because the activity has its own ID.
Right.
So instead of using like the request ID that came in from somewhere else, instead, or just was like made up internally, the activity ID represents the activity of that, or the ID of that individual request.
Right.
But if your spa sends in a parent or a trace context or trace parent like this, if the incoming ASP.NET Core application receives a trace parent header, then it will use that as the parent activity ID through everything else in your system. Right. So you can create your own trace parents in the spa, and there's APIs to do that. There's like, open telemetry or W3C trace context libraries to do this, to be able to generate these IDs to be able to search. So my search did work. I grabbed the ID of the most recently created request, shoved it in the search up here, and now I'm able to find that one specific request amongst all the others. So you can imagine if you did like user IDs or card IDs, I would be able to see all of the traces for whatever that user did, and be able to quickly hone in on exactly what potential problems that user may have run into.
Ah, that's brilliant.
That's actually
an observation to make. Baggage gets lost. Well, it's not going through an airport, so I think we're good.
Yes.
What is an airport actually? I can't remember. I remember some.
Oh, I don't know. We'll be back someday.
Yeah, it's fun. Oh God, people are saying thank you for showing this. Now, next is where do people go next to get started with OpenTelemetry? And is the code that you showed us available on GitHub so people can go and have a look and preview what you showed us today, or what's the best place? In other words.
All right, so yes, you can go to the OpenTelemetry website. So it's opentelemetry.io to learn about that stuff.
Yep.
If you want to learn more about extending or connecting OpenTelemetry to .NET, you'll actually go through here. There's a documentation site that shows all the different. Actually, there goes broad language support. You can click C#. .NET. So the OpenTelemetry site is great for learning all about OpenTelemetry, how to hook it up to your application, what languages are supported, what platforms are supported. It's all there. If you want to see the behind the scenes about what's going on underneath the covers, then I can I'll share some links after this that kind of go into the nuts and bolts details.
Okay. Is there a way to enable on runtime or disable tracing in runtime, or do you have to keep it all the time on?
No, you don't have to. So way over here in my startup, right here, there are some additional configuration things you can pass in to be able to say do or do not turn this on.
Right.
So by default, when you have an activity and an activity source, it will not actually create the activity unless something is listening to it. So these things are the listeners for those activities. But over in the OpenTelemetry configuration, you can also tell it to sample or not. And so it's the sampling that determines whether or not we want to actually take that and then export it out somewhere else. So we can just turn sampling completely off, or if we're in production, we could just say, if environment equals development, do this. If environment is not development, don't do any of this stuff. Don't register anything.
Right.
So we could wrap this whole thing in a if block if you want.
Yes. Now I remember in what was it certain exporters provide you the ability of an XML or a JSON file where you can go and configure things. And there were even ones that could react to those changes on runtime, so you didn't have to restart your app or you didn't have to redeploy your code. Is that available for OpenTelemetry as well, or do we, in effect, have to be a little bit more proactive on how we do our tracing?
So I don't think the ones that I pulled in have that ability. So Zipkin and Jaeger, I don't think I've got that. I've got exporter options. I don't even know what the exporter processor type. Batch, simple. Oh, right. So it can either do one at a time or it can batch them up together.
Oh yeah, that was the other question I had. Like App Insights does batching.
Yes, so these exporters have kind of exposed those sort of options for you. Now Zipkin itself does also have like direct support for ASP.NET Core. So what they've tried to do is like expose that sort of configuration as part of this as well. Now, if you're talking about like, does it automatically react to configuration changes? That's really up to the exporters themselves to be able to have that ability to like reload configuration in case of changes. I don't think these have, but App Insights may have done that.
Okay. So the other question I would probably have is, I suspect that correlation ID, that parent ID, that event ID can be propagated between single page apps and server side apps and other things, right? So it doesn't, as long as the OpenTelemetry library supports your framework, then you're good to go, right? You don't have to do anything special.
Exactly. So that W3C standard is getting support not just from Microsoft, but like a lot of different server technologies. And one of the things that the OpenTelemetry folks are also looking at is the ability to support different standards besides just like W3C trace context, because there are a lot of folks still using like the B3 standard out there, and there's a couple other standards. So the idea is that W3C is kind of the out of the box one for .NET, but if you want to do something else, to be able to make that pluggable. So if you have an existing system application you don't want to change, then be able to plug in, well, this is a different kind of propagator format.
Right. Okay. That's awesome. Cool. So we have OpenTelemetry.io if you want to go and have a look on how to get started, and I suspect they have samples for every language under there. And we'll try to get some of that code that we saw today on our YouTube page, so you can go and have a look. Do you have any blogs or anything that you talk about these things, or any talks that we can point people to if they want to also catch up later?
Yep, I had a whole blog series on this of step-by-step of building all this stuff out. So it's got behind-the-scenes stuff as well as like the final picture of putting it all together. Yeah.
I love the shameless plug. Let's do this. I will add the links to those blog posts. I mean, that's the whole point, right? To help you, pass that information around and for everybody to learn. So brilliant. We'll include these links. Thank you very much for coming today, Jimmy. It's been a blast. Yeah. I've learned so many things. And I love how we talked about distributed, but we never mentioned once microservices or containers, which is like, I was expecting you to come in all guns blazing with Kubernetes, but I love it. It's the fact that you kept everything simple, and I appreciate that because people take it to the very far extreme of distribution, right? You can't have distributed systems, or you can have distributed systems without using containers or microservices. So I appreciate that. That was a fantastic demo.
Thanks.
And for everybody else, we will be back on Monday with our workshop. We're continuing our identity workshop for Microsoft 365. So we will be live at 10 a.m. And then we're off on Tuesday. We don't have a stream on Tuesday. Our friends on Wednesday may be coming. The IT Pro series with Stefan and Daniel will probably be on. And then we're back on Friday next week with some exciting Microsoft Identity.web and new tooling for identity for you. Plus, we're building some code, so it's going to be exciting. Before you go, let's raid one of our friends. I think we can go to our friend Cal Codes and provide some raid love there, because who doesn't love to be raided? Let me find how to do that, and we'll let Jimmy go in a second. What is it? Dashboard. I need to go to my dashboard. See, I'm still learning about these things. And, sharing the love with other Twitch streamers, it's always fun. Dashboard. Twitch dashboard. Twitch.tv 45. So E45. So yeah, I need to. I should have done my URLs properly. Okay, I'm here now, so good to raid. Thanks everyone for joining us today. It's been a blast, and we'll see you all next week. Have a nice weekend. And we are done.
Hey!
I think. No. Now we